There's been a lot of noise and fury around the subject of electric cars lately. I wrote a piece for the Telegraph this week about how the market for electric cars has pretty much dropped completely out of Europe because of lots and lots of cheap imports coming in from China and people being much more reticent about buying second-hand electric cars. So basically, Britain is amongst one of the few countries, I think, which is not putting up major tariffs to stop China from bringing electric cars into the country and undercutting the cost of any other electric car, whether it's made in Europe or made elsewhere. Let's talk to Graham and find out what's going on. Graham, very good morning to you.
Yeah, hi, Mike.
Hi. I mean, it seems as though most countries in the world are kind of putting up what you might call protectionist measures and tariffs to China so that they can't just flood the market with cheap electric cars. But Britain's not doing it. And I understand part of the reason for that is because, you know, Britain exports quite a lot of cars in the other direction to China.
Yeah, China is in the top 5 export markets for British vehicles. I mean, cars are the top goods export from the UK, and some 80% of the vehicles that are made here in Britain are exported abroad. The EU also represents the largest market that British vehicles go to. In China itself, I mean, the market for Western vehicles is declining because automakers are ramping up EV production. There's tons of brands like BYD, Geely, Chery, and they have a growing market share, and that Western automotive market share is declining in China.
Right. I mean, there seems to be a lot of confusion in Europe at the moment. We've just seen one of the big battery manufacturers shutting down most of their operations, saying that, you know, they're no longer going to be able to do it because 700 people, I think, are being made redundant. BMW have gone to China to make a load of batteries rather than have it done in the UK. Tesla's gigafactory in Germany isn't being built. Volvo are saying that they're moving back on the promise to make only electric cars for 2030. You know, it seems as though the electric car manufacturing business in Europe is kind of falling away.
Yeah, I mean, you see Volkswagen as well has in recent weeks said that it's going to potentially close one of its factories.
Yeah.
And you know, maybe move production elsewhere. I mean, around the world, like China's electric vehicle production has boomed. I mean, the Center for Strategic and International Studies calculate that between 2009 and 2023, the Chinese government supported its electric vehicle industry to the tune of $230.9 billion US. That's a massive amount. And in the West, the automotive sector hasn't been supported to that transition to electrification in nearly the same way. I mean, Biden administration's come out in the past couple of years with its Inflation Reduction Act, right, with consumer rebates for electric vehicles. Yeah, it seems that China is making that switch, where Western automakers have been much slower off the starting point.
Right, but hasn't Biden also offered that discount and that kind of, you know, deal for people who buy electric cars, only to people who buy electric cars which have got batteries made in the US rather than actual Chinese imports?
Right. Yeah. Precisely. Here in Europe, in the UK and throughout the EU, a lot of the batteries are made in China, and the supply chains go back. And there's been reports that find, you know, forced labor of Uyghurs in the Chinese region of Xinjiang is involved in that production, and that's part of the reason why those vehicles are so cheap. BYD has come out with a model that's apparently going to retail for $11,000, you know, US. Right. And you know, car makers find it very difficult to compete with those
kind of prices. Yeah, absolutely right. Graham, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Graham Langtree there, senior UK trade reporter at Politico, where the Chinese are basically undercutting everybody, but most countries in the world are defending themselves and putting up tariffs to stop the Chinese from flooding their markets with cheap cars, which, as we just heard there from Graham, could cost as little as $11,000, maybe, you know, £15,000 for an electric car. You know, nobody can compete with that. But of course, David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, and the trade people in the Labour government and Keir Starmer are too frightened to put any tariffs on China because they want to sell more cars from us to them. as well.